So, looks like my plans for this evening have randomly changed, so now we're going to do a video. I just did a video where the premise was basically a bunch of SJWs were talking about how a bunch of people on Twitter were racist and sexist for kind of commenting on, they were worried that the Star Trek Discovery was going to be very PC or very informed by SJW values and philosophy, and they were worried that would make it suck. I mean, even if you hate the philosophy behind something, if it makes it awesome, who fucking cares, right? But I thought, God, and that video ended up way longer than I wanted it to be, and I cut a lot out. Even then, I think there's a lot to talk about there. I mean, why? Because clearly there's some question about it. Why would anyone be concerned that PC values would make something suck? You either totally know what I'm talking about and this is utterly redundant, or you're not really receptive to it, in which case you're not going to watch this video. So I have no idea why I'm making this video, but I felt like it and I have nothing better to do right now. So let's go. Diversity in Comics recently it's a channel on YouTube. Check him out, he's got some really good stuff. Did some commentary on, I think it was a recent Iron Man number 6 or 7 or something like that. And I disagree with a lot of his commentary on that comic. I did look at it because you can just do that. You just grab stuff online. It's no problem. And he's right about one thing, though. It's an Iron Man comic where the new Iron Man is actually a woman named Ray Ray or something like that, which is fine. And she's kind of a cliched millennial, which is fine. It's a comic book. A lot of the characters started out as cliches. Tony Stark, a hard-drinking millionaire inventor, corporate guy. Captain America, an all-American patriot, and so on and so forth. It's part of the language of comics. Characters are greatly simplified and condensed, often using cliches. It's part of its language to make them simpler. So that's no problem. Whatever. She's a generic millennial. That isn't an issue. That part of her personality is fine. It's what you attach to it that makes the character interesting. What changes as that character? How does that character, having been established as a cliche, develop from there? How does that springboard or interact in interesting ways with the rest of the world and other characters and so forth? That's your actual story. That's how you determine whether or not it's a good, worthwhile comic, or story of any sort for that matter. The problem with Ray Ray isn't Ray Ray. I mean, a character who's oblivious or arrogant or whatever, or flawed in any ways, is perfectly fine. Flawed characters are good. Arrogant characters are good. It sets up a whole world of possibilities for them to become more self-aware or to interact with other arrogant characters, have a clash of personalities, egos, and so on. That's fine. That can be developed later. That's why you set it up in the first place. I'm getting into that in a bit, but there are two problems with the comic, one of which is I don't believe it's intended for Ray Ray to be arrogant or self-important. I mean, she comes across that way, but I don't think that's the intention. She's just, in their minds, they've created a perfect character, a flawless character, and that's problematic. Two, the dialogue comes across, all the dialogue in the comic comes across as very bland, except for the Z-grade villain who attacks at one point, which comes across as very generic. But then you look into it and you start to examine it, and Tony Stark, a very arrogant, self-important character in the past, God, I'm not going to go into this, but Tony Stark seems out of character in that he's just constantly complimenting Ray Ray. And then the other characters are all complimenting Ray Ray. And then you realize absolutely everyone is, at all times, constantly. To the point it becomes nauseating a little. It's classic trope. Show, don't tell. Don't tell me how good someone is. Show me how good they are. There's only one fight in the comic. And she loses. I mean, It's to the point everyone spends so much time telling us how amazing Ray Ray is. I half expect the villain at one point to say something nice about her hair or outfit or something like that. It's really ridiculous. It should be explained, having just set that character up going into this. PC culture is not the same as SJW culture. In general, SJW, social justice warriors, people who are very adamant and very strict about their interpretation of PC, will be PC, but not everyone who's invested in PC culture is going to be a full-blown social justice warrior. So virtually all SJWs are PC culture related or invested, but the opposite isn't necessarily true. In fact, it often isn't. Most people aren't that extreme. The problem with characters invested that way, full-blown SJWs, is that they tend to be boring. They tend to be very diverse. That is to say, the character is going to be a minority or female for some reason, despite the fact half the population is female. It's a big deal now, despite the fact there have been female characters leading comic books forever. One of my favorites, Spider-Woman, but also Ms. Marvel. But alright, fine. So generally you have a character who's somehow an outlier or of a demographic that social justice warriors are very invested in. And that's fine. That is actually perfectly fine. We've had lots of comics with characters like that in the past that have either been headliners or supporting characters who later became headliners for their own comics, or what have you. Perfectly fine. The problem is, the thing that makes SJWs different than, say, me or someone else with my mindset is that there's a priority to make that character perfect. That is to say, they have no flaws. They're not greedy. They're not selfish. They're super enlightened. It's like they're not just female minorities. They're magical female minorities who have no real need for growth. They're already perfect. Those tend to make very bland characters. It's the flaws, the weaknesses that make people interesting and gives them someplace to go, someplace to get better, or something. Perfect example. I mentioned Ray Ray. Ray Ray is a boring character. She has no personality. Her personality is that everyone thinks she's amazing and constantly tells her that. And we're not really shown amazing Ray Ray, we're just told about it. She's not given the room to be less than perfect so that she can undergo an arc that transforms her or improves her or tests her or challenges her beliefs. It's like, I don't know what her beliefs are. I believe her beliefs are that she's perfect, and why wouldn't she believe that? Everyone spends all moments of the comic telling her that. This explained to me as the Galbraith paradox. So let's go through this briefly. It works something like this. There's a character called Guybrush. Guybrush is an obnoxious character. He's this male character, white male, who is over-sexualized. He's very arrogant, very, very sexually forward. He's very incompetent at his job, thinks way too much of himself. He's not terribly bright. He's just a lousy person who we often make fun of. He's the butt of jokes, and often unconsciously so. He's just that dumb and stupid, and that's okay. That's all right. There's nothing wrong with making a character like that. That's his character, and his interactions with other characters tells you a lot about these other characters. You know, do they put up with him? Do they agree with him on certain things? Do they disagree with him? How do they confront him? And da-da-da-da-da. He's a character used to characterize other characters. It's how characters interact in stories, and for that matter, how people interact in real life. The Galbraith paradox, the way it works is, imagine the exact same character, only make that character female. And at which point, and this is about SJWs, so let's talk about them. The premise is they would pitch a fit if they saw a character like that, and often when they do see characters even remotely like that, they have in the past, complaining about over-sexualized covers of Spider-Woman or different characters in Marvel movies. Why is this character like that? Why is this character straight? And so on. I heard complaints that Korra in Mass Effect Andromeda was straight, and that was an awful thing for some reason, and so on and so forth. And that's the paradox part of it. This character is perfectly fine. No one complains about it as long as it's a male character. But if you make this character female or a minority or anything other than a cis white male, people will scream bloody murder. And that's where the paradox comes in. That's where the problem comes in, and that's used to explain a lot of why a lot of characters in video games and some stories are often males, simply the overwhelmingly male, because no one complains when you have a character with flaws and that character is a white male. Who cares? That's their character. That's what they're supposed to do. It makes perfect sense. If they make that character female, lots of complaints, so what you end up with are overwhelmingly white male characters. Is that the only factor I believe that explains why characters can be overwhelmingly white males in stories and video games? No, I don't think so at all. I think that's just one factor amongst many, but it is a factor and it needs to be addressed. Okay, addressing. So, leading into why do people complain about PC culture and SJW culture and philosophy in movies and entertainment? The fear is that exactly what I described, what's already happening in Marvel's Iron Man, what happened in, I guess to some extent, Ghostbusters. One complaint was every male character is incredibly, impossibly stupid. Just ridiculously obtuse, uptight, or stupid. To the point it's jarring. That's ruinous to the story. It's like I don't want to watch a bunch of stupid people and side by side with a bunch of perfect people, with the understanding that I'm somehow going to relate to the perfect people, the people who have no flaws, who aren't allowed to have flaws. It makes for a boring story. Going right around back to the beginning, this was originally predicated on Star Trek Discovery. The fear, I mean, at this point, we don't know anything about Discovery. And like I said before, my theory is that we don't know anything about Discovery because there's nothing to discover. That I don't think they have that much ready and done. Like, they've already pushed back release dates and stuff like that. I think after trashing their original footage, I heard they made a bunch of footage, enough for a couple episodes, and it's all in the trash can. Characters actors they have contracts with have been recast. They have nothing. So, with nothing to fixate on, ultimately the fear is that with no evidence to contradict it, the fear is that that's what's going to happen. That Star Trek Discovery is going to be so PC, so SJ informed, that it's just going to be bland, boring characters that are already perfect and we don't care about, and have sort of straw man personal conflicts. Like, you're supposed to be perfect. Well, I am almost perfect, so I guess I'll just be perfect, and da-da-da-da-da. It's presented as a conflict, and it's really not. And that's really just the gist of it. Just wanted to go through that real quick. I wanted to expand on that in the previous video, but the previous video was already way too long. It is still way too long, but I'm trying to work on making these shorter, which I think will be easier in the summer because I have to turn the air conditioner off, and already it's getting really hot in this room. So the weather will enforce my brevity. Alright, I think that's it. I'm out.